Ahlan wa sahlan, marhaban. Today I'm going to talk about an Islamic figure who's usually just a mere footnote in many books of Islamic history. Um, to the best of my humble knowledge, I don't know of any monograph that is written about this figure, Ibn Qasī. And he did have an impact on Islamic political history as well as Islamic intellectual history. You may say he had a tertiary role, enough to be mentioned for the Mu'tabirun movement. He definitely, you would say was a figure who was a catalyst in Islamic Spain, and you'll see why. But this will be a short video. After this video, I'm going to talk about Ibn Hazm, the famous Zahiri. He was a big scripturalist or literalist, or whatever term you want to use for Zahiri. He was very eccentric, highly intelligent, and highly influential in not only Islamic Spain, but all of Islamic intellectual history. So this is kind of leading up to that. And so I'm going to read again from my article from the Journal of the Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi Society, volume 64, published 2018, Countercurrent Movements of Andalusia and Ibn Arabi, with some commentary. Far from the political quietism, asceticism, and mysticism of Ibn Masarra, Ibn Barrajan, and Ibn al-Arif was the strongly esotericist, revolutionary, insurgent figure of Ibn Qasī. His Muridun revolt was able to capture and create a city-state. So his movement was called the Muridun movement, and Murid is it literally means aspirant or somebody who has desire, and it refers to the follower of a Sufi sheikh, someone who desires to be on the path, suluk, the Sufi path, or aspires to have a murshid, a spiritual guide, such as the Sufi sheikh. So his movement was called the Muridin Revolt, and he was able to capture and create a city-state, which were called Ta'ifa in Islamic Spain, which we mentioned before. So he created a city-state in Silves, or Silves, I'm not sure how it's pronounced there in Spain. Even before his political uprising, he was known by the state jurist establishment for sowing corruption, taking over the minds of the ignorant, and claiming sainthood. So a lot of people thought this guy was a fake sheikh, in other words, that he was claiming religious authority, but a lot of people weren't actually going to give him that religious authority. He was seen as an imposter. And he held the titles of Imam and Mahdi, which are very charged in the Islamic world, especially in the Shi'i world. And as we talked about before, especially the Fatimids, the Shia, they had an influence in Islamic Spain, an intellectual influence, with Ikhwan al-Safa and various other Neo-Platonist type of texts. And so by saying Imam means you're the leader of the whole Muslim community, you're claiming to be a Khalifa, you claim to be Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're claiming to be a leader of some sort of band of fighters. Like, it has all these various connotations. And then Mahdi being the person who's going to come back on the Day of Judgment to, lead the Muslims. So it's all very, at the end times, not the Day of Judgment, but at the end times. So it's all very loaded, terminology here. And, Ibn Qasī, he did all of this to undermine the current state, okay? So Ibn Qasī would later join the Almohads, the Al-Muwahidun, in conquering Al-Andalus. But subsequently, he rebelled against them with the help of the Christian king of Portugal, Alfonso Henrique, an action which caused his own followers to behead Ibn Qasī in 1151 Gregorian, thrusting his head on the very lance given to him by the king of Portugal, Henrique. So Ibn Qasī is best known for his treatise, Discarding the Two Shoes and Borrowing Light from the Sight of the 2 Feet. So Khala' al-Na'lin وإقتباس النور من الموضع القدمين. So he has this, treatise about, from what I understand, it is praising the sandals of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is something that is a Sufi motif, theme in Sufi literature that began perhaps with Ibn Qasī. I'm not aware of any texts earlier than his in this genre, in Islamic Spain and Morocco. And still to this day, you'll see very often, Sufis who use the symbolism of the sandal. They have the sandal on the top of their kufi, their hat, their ta'iyya, and they'll have it as maybe a pin on their clothing nowadays, or all kinds of stuff. The sandal is kind of a symbolism for especially on the head. Like my head is below the foot of the Prophet, and the sole of the sandal, my head is below that. It's a way of showing humility. It's also a way of showing love for the Prophet and all these different things. And so it goes all the way back, to this time period, the 12th century. And so this text here, which Ibn Qasī wrote, is influenced by Ibn Masarra and other undercurrents in Andalusia. So a lot of this comes from the Mu'tabirun movement, the Sandala and everything like that. The Sheikh al-Akbar, meaning Ibn Arabi, became familiar with this text when he met Ibn Qasī's son in Tunis. So Muhyiddin ibn Arabi met the son of Ibn Qasī in Tunis in 1194 Gregorian. Ibn Arabi would later write a commentary, Sharh, on the text, pejoratively referring to Ibn Qasī as a blind follower, muqallid, an ignoramus, jahil, an impostor, and nothing more than a transmitter of texts, naqil. Ibn Arabi then goes on to elaborate on how Ibn Qasī was just parroting one of his teachers. He's just copying, just narrating one of his teachers, not really with understanding. The teacher's name was Khalifullah, and that Ibn Qasī was not a muhaqqaq. He was not a self-realized person, but rather an ignoramus, even if he did recognize him as a person of unveiling, kashf. So that was Ibn Qasī. I do recommend taking a look at his text if you're able to find it. I think there's a PDF of it out there. I remember reading it, or at least skimming it. And next video, we will start getting into Ibn Hazm. And I'll try to give a brief biography of Ibn Hazm, what his role or position was in the Andalusian undercurrents, and how he had a major impact on Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, in my opinion. And I'll try to see if we can get a guest speaker here to talk about this further. Maybe we get a couple of different guests here, because this is a new area of research. People are trying to understand what was the fiqh, what was the Islamic legal position of Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, who were the people who influenced him, and those types of things. So until next time, ma'a salama.